What is up, guys? It is your boy Keep It Real, and today we're going to be talking about the sad reality of Redfall. If you didn't know, Redfall released May 1st, 2023, and it was supposed to be Microsoft's big release for the summer. Unfortunately, that was not the case. This game was a mess. It was incomplete. Nothing really meshed. It was just kind of all thrown together and released, hoping that it would get sales. I'm going to show you what this game is, a clip from Moist Critical on the state of it when it launched, but I really want to look at these reviews and then I'll tell you why it failed. So 36% of the 891 user reviews in recent are positive. That's bad. That means that 64% of people did not enjoy the game. Then you got 32% of 1,703. Again, 68% of people found it negative. So what is Redfall? Redfall is an open world game, single player and co-op FPS from Arcane Austin. It continues to say their two most big franchises, Dishonored and Prey. Okay, both great single player games. Single player. Continuing Arcane's legacy of carefully crafted worlds and immersive sims, Redfall brings the studio's signature gameplay to this story-driven action shooter. See what happens with these companies? They want a multiplayer game. Just like Gotham Knights. That game came out and all they wanted was money, so they made it multiplayer. So just stay tuned. Look at the concurrent players, all-time peak last month, 6,124. 24-hour peak, 139, and players as of right now, 67. Okay, if those seem like big numbers to you, 67 people can be inside of a gym. That is a huge decrease from its original release. They are down almost 90% in concurrent players, and the game just released last month. So as you see, the trend is downward, with the peaks probably being the same people. That's just the same people hopping on the game. And then it just continues. 1,619 in top sellers. That game just came out last month. 906 total positive reviews, followed by 2,243 negative reviews. That goes to show you that this game was not well received by the community, only leading to a big drop. Maybe they can come back if the game is patched like 2 years later, but really terrible launch, and there's a reason. Another reason they shot themselves in the foot before the game was released is they unfortunately decided to lock the Xbox edition to 30 FPS. Now, you cannot release a next-gen game, throw it out there, 30 FPS, and expect people to just buy it, man. Nobody eats that up. I'm going to show you a little clip from Moist Critical about the gameplay. I just took it from his video, watched it, and then I was like, you know what, let me show you guys just how unfinished this game really is.
Let's see. Can they actually just not get around obstacles? That's wild. That's actually nutty. How did this town even lose to them?
So that in that clip, this is the main threat of the game. This is what is supposed to draw the players in. A terrible AI vampire. This was not thought out. This was not reviewed. They just wanted to dump it out and hope that that hype that they produced a few years back carried it. Look at the reviews on Metacritic. 3.4 user review, 56 for Metascore critics, Xbox Series X. And the Xbox version has a higher rating than the Steam version, which has a 2.1 user rating and a 54 Metacritic critic score. Another review from OpenCritic. 14% of critics recommend, and it's a weak OpenCritic. It's even on the bottom of the Steam charts, as you see right here. It's one of the worst games on Steam. It's $70. This game released at a full price. That is ridiculous. Microsoft and Arcane knew exactly what they were pushing out. If you have the game and you enjoy it, by no means am I saying that you should not. I am just saying that companies like this love to release half-finished products in the hype. They hope that we are feeding off their energy. So let me tell you exactly why it failed. And this was awesome because it was released June 1st, 2023. And this is why they failed by Bloomberg. Over the years, Microsoft Corp owned video game developer Arcane Studios has cultivated a reputation for releasing those games. Prey and Dishonored, they don't really sell very well, but they are great games. Redfall is a multiplayer set in a fictional Massachusetts island full of vampires and was panned. It was absolutely bombed. Let's continue reading. But to the makers of Redfall, the mediocre reception was no big surprise. So Arcane knew what was happening. The project suffered from unclear direction, frequent attrition, and perennial lack of the staff. According to more than a dozen people who worked on the game, speaking anonymously because they were not authorized to discuss it publicly, a spokesperson for Redfall's publisher Bethesda Softworks declined to comment. So right there, that's saying that the people working on the game weren't even sure what they were making. Only the money people knew what game was being made. And if you don't have that communication between your creators and your big corps, you're going to end up with a game like this. Let's continue. Behind the scenes, the company was encouraging its studios to develop games that could generate revenue beyond the initial sales, a popular trend dubbed games as a service. This is where Arcane got absolutely murdered. Arcane is not a big studio. Arcane does not make huge games. They make creative games, but they're not known for multiplayer open world games that have DLC, especially live service. What are you going to do? Make a battle pass? You know, this type of stuff is just ridiculous. And because they're not making a lot of money off of games like Prey and Dishonored, they push out live service. Live service doesn't solve every issue. Elden Ring was a great example. According to the people familiar with the process, ZeniMax was strongly urging developers as its subsidiaries to implement microtransactions. That is, reoccurring opportunities within games for players to spend real money, say, outfitting their characters. This is absurd. Honestly, I am glad Redfall failed because, granted, I don't want anybody to be losing their jobs. When a company decides that their primary backing for the game is to make it a live service to gain money, there's no passion in that project, so you're gonna end up with Redfall. Following the commercially unsuccessful release of its sci-fi shooter Prey a year earlier, that's a great game. However, not a lot of people are fans of their style of games. Leadership across the company wanted to make something more broadly appealing. What eventually emerged was the idea to make a multiplayer game in which users would team up to battle vampires and perhaps pay for occasional cosmetic upgrades. See, nobody would mind paying for cosmetics if the game itself was already perfect. You could have released the game as a co-op game, single player, and just added these things later. If the game was good, nobody would mind spending money. But as you saw from Moist's video, the AI is dumb. The AI does not work. They grew frustrated with management frequently shifting references to other games such as Far Cry and Borderlands that left each department with varying ideas of what exactly they were making. Far Cry and Borderlands are nothing alike. They're open world, but that's it. They have nothing alike. So they're spewing two different types of games and then hoping that they can come up with something in the middle. I'm sorry, Borderlands and Far Cry do not mesh. They do not mesh. This game would have been good if it was like Borderlands, but it's not like Borderlands. Arcane was so perpetually understaffed, said people familiar with its production, the studio's Austin office employed less than 100 people. So you're putting less than 100 people to make a huge multiplayer game? Don't expect no money. The studio's sufficient for a relatively small single-player game like Prey, but not enough to compete with a multiplayer behemoths like Fortnite and Destiny. That's nothing. They have thousands of developers working on a game. They have thousands of artists, man. Veteran workers who weren't interested in developing multiplayer games left in droves. By the end of Redfall's development, roughly 70% of the Austin staff who had worked on Prey would no longer be at the company. So not only did they try to do something that they'd never done before, they also pushed out the classic people. Those people knowing what we like, those people that work with the AI, those people that work with those skills, and made those two great franchises. ZeniMax had a reputation for paying lower than average salaries and convincing some progressive or moderate video game developers to move to Texas could be difficult due to the state's conservative social policies. If you don't know, Texas is very conservative, but you can't just ask people to come over and then pay them $2 an hour. There's companies that will pay them more to make a more appealing game. People who applied were by and large looking to work on single-player immersive sims. Arcane and ZeniMax, your specialty is single-player games. Work on a single-player game and make it great. Don't focus on trying to be Call of Duty. Meanwhile, on September 21, 2020, Microsoft purchased ZeniMax for $7.5 billion. It was an ambitious move that gave Xbox control over lucrative franchises such as Doom and Fallout, as well as the upcoming Starfield. Now, if they try to do the same thing, Starfield will fail. If they try to push out something that is not done in order for us to just be hyped and buy, it will not sell. And they also own Skyrim. They can literally make Elder Scrolls 6 Xbox exclusive, man. But when you have games like Redfall that is also backed by Bethesda and doesn't help, that makes you afraid for games like Starfield and the future of Elder Scrolls. The acquisition, so them acquiring Bethesda, gave the staff at Arcane hope that Microsoft might cancel Redfall, or better yet, let them reboot it as a single-player game. Now they have that backing. Now they have that money. Now they have those extra people, extra hands to work on the game to make it better. Instead, Microsoft maintained a hands-off approach. Hey, you make the game. You do this. We don't have to pay attention. You know what you're doing. This is where companies fail. They don't partake in the creation of things they're trying to get their customers to buy, and they don't know what we want. Microsoft Spencer would later say in the kind of funny interview that Xbox didn't do a good job early engaging Arcane Austin. You had a hands-off approach. You cannot engage anybody. It's a hands-off approach. You're basically telling them, do it by yourself. We don't want anything to do with it. This is your problem. During a 2021 press conference, Xbox positioned the Bloody Vampire Extravaganza as one of the company's big upcoming releases, dramatically revealing its event show-stopping finale. This is what makes me sad. Microsoft is competing against PlayStation. PlayStation that has God of War. PlayStation that has Last of Us. And PlayStation that literally has Spider-Man coming up and Wolverine. And guess what? Sony will not release them if they suck. Now, I can't say anything about The Last of Us Part 1 release on Steam. Whole different studio worked on it. But what I can say is that their exclusives are closely monitored by PlayStation. So when they release, they get sales. And if it goes to show you, people like single-player games. God of War has no multiplayer. Last of Us Part 1 doesn't have a multiplayer. Dude, nobody wants multiplayer games unless that's what they're already getting into. We want story-driven games. If we see Arcane in the name, we want that game. The debut date was pushed back, so it was delayed from Halloween of 22 to early 2023, and then eventually to May 2nd, 2023. So these delays were like great for us because we were thinking this game was going to be finished. No, this game released in a terrible state. like you saw from Moise's video. This game is just sad. So Redfall failed, not because Arcane is not creative, and not because they have love for games. They don't have love for games, but because the company that was pushing them didn't monitor them. The publisher, ZeniMax, wanted to make the most money possible, gathering hype because of Prey and Dishonored not bringing enough money they wanted, so they wanted to do a live service. And guess what? It's not even live service. It's barely multiplayer. It barely functions. They have less sales than they would have if they had cut out the co-op. And you have to be online to play this. Who wants to be online to play single player? This is what I'm talking about, guys. This is something you have to look out for before you buy games. You have to look out for those delays. You have to look at these publishers, because the publishers are really what ruin games, not the creative people. It's the publishers. So this is why Redfall failed. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please leave a like and subscribe. And always, as always,